Should I be doing?
Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Well, Stephanie Thomas makes Connecticut tick. She's the Secretary of the State. She's in charge of our elections and all our business registries. And she's in the fourth year of her first term.
Third year.
Okay.
Don't rush it, Paul.
Don't rush it. Lots been going on. If you've been following the news about elections, he's here for an update back in the studio. So nice to have you back in the studio, Stephanie Thomas.
Always a pleasure to be here.
So, as we said before came on the air, there's two words you hear day, all night, early voting.
Early voting.
Boy, have elections changed in our lifetime. People vote. A lot of people vote early now.
Yes. In the presidential election, you may recall, in Connecticut, 40% statewide average, 40% of everyone who voted used early in-person voting. But in some towns, that represented over 60% of their electorate. Amazingly popular.
Yeah,
but you can easily see why.
Well, I remember you coming on the show when we were talking about the bill to create it.
Mm-hmm.
It was this whole process. We have to have it passed twice, constitutional amendment.
Yeah.
And I remember there were concerns, people saying, we want to have it so that people are voting for the same election. Let's say if you start too long in advance, like they do some places, everything could change. You cast your ballot, then it turned out that somebody stole jewels from the Louvre or something, and you want to vote for them, but you didn't get a chance because they were so good at the heist. And you said you were trying to strike a balance.
Mm-hmm.
You said you think early voting gave people more of a chance to vote, which we want, but you don't want it to be so spread out in time that we're voting in different elections. So you went on the 2-week.
No, my recommendation was actually for a shorter period of time, but like all laws, it went through the process. I gave my opinion. Some people showed up to testify, not enough, I think, but some. And, at the end of the day, there were people who wanted 30 days and there were people who wanted 1 day. And the legislature came up with 2 weeks.
Split the baby in half.
Yeah.
What were you going for, like 4 days?
No, originally I started with 7, and then I talked to a lot of people, and I saw the benefit of 2 full weekends. So I ended on 10, and then I think I was on 4 days for primaries instead of 7 in municipal years. So the legislature, I think, had a very difficult job. You have to strike a balance between voter education and whatever reform you're seeking. Because if you change the rules for every single election, like some primaries are this, but
it gets so confusing.
Voters get too confused.
It's like our districts in New Haven, the state legislative districts. Some people vote at different polling places year to year, which is not a good thing.
It's really hard when you're not also investing in that voter education work, because at the end of the day, you don't want these things to disenfranchise voters that you're trying to help.
So you came up with the 2-week, not you, the legislature.
Yeah.
And again, I think because I'm old and cranky, I didn't like the idea of a long extended one. When you were on here, you convinced me that it made sense to make it a little easier by having a few more days. But and as a journalist, I feel like, well, what happens now? It's in those final 2 weeks, a lot of people started voting. What do we report that changes the race,
Well, here's what I think. I'm one person, but a lot of these Louvre heist stories that break,
I want to vote for those guys.
Usually are secured well in advance, and campaigns release it right before voting begins. So whether voting is on election day or early voting, they can release that bombshell at any time, right? It's very rare that something actually timely happened right before. But the beauty about our election system is if you are risk averse, don't vote early. Go on election day.
And is the gain that we get more people to vote?
That's not why I've ever done it. I don't even have that data. But I do think people believe it boosts turnout. My goal has always been to make sure that every eligible voter who wants to vote is able to do so. And, I live downstate where a lot of people commuted to New York City. Believe it or not, I used to be on the 4:53 a.m. train Or on the late day, the 5:23 a.m. train.
Did you sleep on the train or did you do work?
No, I did work. I ran my own business, so like I was working 80 hours a week in another state. So I would leave early or try to leave early to go home and vote, but Metro North might have a delay or I might get called into a meeting or something. And I always did manage to vote, but sometimes it was a very close call, like getting there at 7:50. And when you think about life, you know, someone has a family member in hospice and then it happens on election day, that tragedy happens. Someone's pregnant, due, like they don't know when the baby's going to come. Like there's all these real life things. You get a flat tire. So if you're eligible to vote and want to vote and you don't want to risk waiting until election day, I think those people should have other options open to them.
It's very interesting for me to hear you say this because you're basically the chief democracy official.
I am.
We have someone who's in charge of labor. We have someone in charge of revenue. You're in charge of democracy.
Yeah.
And before you came on, I said, okay, let me ask Stephanie, how many people voted? Did this increase? Aren't we doing this just to increase? And you said no just now. You said this is about making sure that everybody who wants to participate can. And I've been thinking about that a lot with democracy. How do we measure the health of a democracy? We'll get to your civics course. You're trying to do that too. And I've come to the conclusion that democracy is not measured by how many people cast a ballot. And it's not how many people read a news article. It's how many people have the opportunity to if they want.
I think you're right.
So you're saying have the opportunity to vote. Like when Ross Perot ran for president in 1992, he said we should have democracy by having everybody at their home computer vote on every bill before Congress. And I thought, is that really democracy? Because they're not spending the time to learn about every bill. They're electing people to, and then like, you know, if 10 times many people read the National Enquirer, the New York Times, because they're more interested in whether aliens visited New Jersey, that's okay as long as everybody can read the news if they want to, and then democracy is about who shows up.
I think that's right. Before I was first elected as a state rep, and certainly before I was secretary, I always thought people weren't voting because of apathy. Like that is what I believed. But now I have found the reasons are much more complex. One of the most compelling arguments I heard about early voting came from AARP because they were trying to protect seniors. A lot of seniors take medication, have ailments like rheumatoid arthritis or something, and they don't always know in advance their good days from their bad days, right? I remember talking to a gentleman once who was still 30 years later, he was in his 80s now, upset that he didn't get a chance to vote because one day on election day, his arthritis was so bad and he believed in voting, but he couldn't make it. So I do believe these reforms make sense and you want to give eligible voters an opportunity like to take that right away just because of a fluke of life, I think is undemocratic.
So some people say people don't vote because something happened, they couldn't come, which I'm positive is true. So this is why you've come to the conclusion you like early voting. Is it also true that sometimes people vote because they think they're either not motivated because they don't care, like things are okay in their town, or they think all politicians think, they don't believe they're going to make a difference? How much of a factor is that?
It does factor in. I'll tell you the reasons I hear the most. Young people in particular report, and these are like political science majors, so like engaged young people have so often told me it feels too hard. And I said, oh, like
wait, a political science major thinks it's too hard to fill in the bubble on the
no, it feels too hard. So I said, oh, like what, like trying to register, like you can't find the information. And they were like, no, I haven't tried, it just feels like it will be very complicated.
Are these
like,
people who are like waking up smoking legal weed, or
I'm telling you,
these are political science majors?
A lot of young people. And I remember a young lady in high school telling me, like, she came up to me like, okay, I believe in voting, I'm gonna vote. And then she's like, should I set aside 4 hours? Is that enough? And this happened to be in Wilton before early voting. And I said, no. I was like I laughed.
Well, some presidential years you do have to wait a long time.
And this was a local year.
Okay.
23.
2 minutes.
So I laughed and she goes, "Oh, do I need longer?" And I said, "No, I think 4 minutes will do it." But young people don't know what they don't know. So, you hear all this national news and you see these people standing in long lines in other states. So there's some trepidation and anxiety, I think, around like doing something wrong or not understanding the process. I also hear from people where English isn't their first language, maybe like they speak it fine every day, but reading a technical ballot also feels a little uncomfortable and they don't think they'll be able to like understand it or get translation help. So sometimes they don't show up. There's so many reasons, but also there's not that much money in elections other than presidential and Congress. You cannot escape seeing an ad about a presidential election. Ads, it's in the newspapers, on everyone's talking about it. No one knows when their board of ed is up for re-election. They just don't. So people also tell me, like, "Oh, I didn't know there was an election this year."
And we'll get to how you're trying to get them to find that out with civic education. I'm a little stuck on the political science majors.
Yeah.
What was hard for them is they thought they'd be in line too long, or they do something.
No, I
mean, how are they going to pass political science courses if they can't vote?
The entire process feels hard. Like when you're in college, and maybe you're in college in a town other than our state, other than where you reside. Like, how do you like register? We forget. Like, how do you vote by absentee ballot? A lot of young people don't know how to address an envelope or where to get a stamp. Like, wow. I mean, there's all these steps.
We've come far as a society. But they do know how to get these machines to work that I can never figure out.
Yes, that's true.
So let's give them that.
Yeah.
We're talking to Stephanie Thomas.
They make great TikToks for me.
We're talking about democracy and early voting with Secretary of the State, Stephanie Thomas, here on Dateline New Haven and WNHH-FM. So how's it going? You're going around the state a lot with this early voting? Early voting started. It's the last 2 weeks, except that Monday. And is that because you want to give the local town clerks and registered voters a chance to get ready for the actual election day?
That's correct. So early voting, part of the reason we only have one or two locations in most towns, you have to be like hooked into a hard line basically to make sure we can look up every voter and make sure they haven't already voted, or they're not have an absentee ballot on file, that kind of thing. So it's a real-time lookup. On election day, it operates very differently. It's a paper-based system. We've all seen the poll book, names get crossed out. Even if they have technology at your polling location, they're keeping a separate paper-based docket. So our registrars, after early voting closes, has to do all that comparison, make sure everyone is crossed off on the paper list who has already voted.
So does that happen on that Monday?
Yes, correct.
That's
Sunday night and that Monday. Yeah.
Because it's now from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And in New Haven, it's at City Hall and at Schwartz Hall on Fitch Street near in the Southern Connecticut State University campus. So now you're going place to place day and night?
Yeah, and I have a lot of meetings.
What are you finding out?
I'm finding out that it's quiet, so I do worry about turnout. I think in presidential elections in Connecticut, like turnout is like 75 to 80%.
I didn't know it was that high.
It is. I mean, we're among the highest in the country in presidential elections. But these same people who are registered, who know how to do it, who think it's important to come out, they stay home for local elections, and that participation drops to 33% on average. Some towns, it's like
will
under
be less
15.
When there's not a contested. When it's not a heavily contested election.
Even when there is, yeah.
And often there's not.
Yeah, often there's not.
So how much early voting is going on? What do you see? How many locations do we have and stuff like that?
So we have locations in every town. We are at, as of last night, 117,000 statewide. But looking at New Haven, I just pulled some numbers. So far, only 928 people have early voted.
Well, according to what we're talking about, it's a lot of money to set up early voting for 2 weeks, right? Because I noticed how many people were there. As I said, I felt like I was at a concierge service. I had 9 people taking care of me, so friendly, and taking me to every step with nobody else in the room. Is it still okay if it ends up being 1,200 people voting out of, I don't know, 20,000, or it won't be 20,000 New Haven. It's like 15,000. So if
Yeah.
1/15th vote for those 2 weeks, was it worth it?
This is what I have asked every registrar in the state. We now have data coming from our largest turnout elections in a presidential year. We'll have data coming from our lowest turnout elections, like municipal elections. I would like to see, like, there's no one who typically collects all that data. So I've asked the registrars to calculate, like, how many voters have come, what the cost was, because towns hire their own poll workers. All of that is done at the municipal level, so we don't get that info. And I want them to send it to us, but also to their state delegation. I do think in this upcoming session, the legislature will be thinking about universal access to absentee ballots, and some tweaks to the early voting law. And we just have to make sure the system all works well together.
Is this our first local election with early voting?
Yes.
So we've had one. We had the presidential
Exactly.
year. And how many people voted that year?
That early voting, I believe it was about 742,000.
And what kind of percentage was that of the
40%.
Oh, yeah, you
voters.
said that. That's high.
Yeah, very
So
high.
now you're going to find out, it might be 40% again.
It might be. But
it might not. It's not sounding
turnout.
like in New Haven.
Yeah.
So is it, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Are you saying you're going to be looking at the data from a highest and lowest so that the legislature could see maybe we don't need as much early voting for local municipal elections?
Well, again, it all has to work together. If they take up the issue of universal access to absentee ballots, as you recall, that was on the ballot in 2024, and Connecticut voters approved that we should amend our constitution to allow for this. But a law wasn't set around it. So right now, for example, in our absentee ballot process, you can show up in person in your town clerk's office and cast your absentee ballot prior to election day. So in some ways, that is early in-person voting. So you wouldn't need duplication of that. So all of this has to be part of the same conversation, which is why I think also the legislature thought, let's get some data so we can consider this all together.
So this is the year they're going to be doing the law?
I don't know.
Ballot?
I don't know. But
Are they supposed to based on?
I mean,
because the legislature passed it twice, correct? Then it went on the ballot, and the voters supported it.
Yeah.
If the voters vote for it, doesn't that mean we have to do it?
No, because what they voted on was whether or not the Constitution could be amended to allow for it. So that doesn't mean you have to pass a law, or it doesn't.
And if they do, does that have to go back to the voters again?
No.
Okay.
The time frame is not dictated.
So in other words, it's possible this year that we could pass a law to amend the Constitution to allow for universal absentee voting.
Yeah.
At that point, is this going to be moot? Will we not need early voting?
Maybe. I would say we still need early voting, but it depends how the absentee ballot law is modified. There are about 33 states, I believe, who have some sort of absentee ballot universal access, including the 8 states that are all vote by mail. So it's a matter of looking at what makes sense for Connecticut. Because nothing has to be absolute. There are so many different ways to do it.
So one way is let's make it a million ways so more people vote. Another way might be if we're spending all this money on early voting and not a lot of people come, why not just have it be universal AB?
Exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Democracy is this thing. We're talking about that with Secretary of State Stephanie Thomas. Do you have a position on how universal absentee balloting should work?
I do have some positions, but everyone's eyes will glaze over if I
Not
start
mine.
talking about it.
I'm interested.
So it did come up in the legislature last year, and there was a school of thought, like, let's just remove the excuses and keep everything else as is. I did not like that idea because I don't think our system was built for the volume that usually happens when you have universal access. So there's a few things I think we should be looking at. Removing circulators from the process. Are some states only allow circulators for like the last month?
Does that mean people like a cop or someone who's dispatched is allowed to do it, and that's where we see a lot of the fraud? I mean, that's been Bridgeport, right?
Yeah. It basically says anybody can sign out applications. I want to be clear about that. Applications, and then like hand them out. And I think there's good reasons to have a law like that. Like I could imagine a community group is like, "Hey, I'm making this easy for you. Here's my application." But a lot of these laws were set, for example, before you could apply online, before computers. So we can look at that differently.
So you'd like people to have to directly ask for their ballot online or by phone or something?
Exactly. Online, in person, by mail.
And is that because of fraud?
I think for me, it's a combination. I think it's a loophole, right? And it's a lot of work for the town clerks because all of these applications have to be numbered. You have to submit a log of who you gave them to. That all has to be tracked. And it's confusing for voters. These are my two biggest reasons.
Voters tell me they thought someone told them they had to do this.
So
the person with authority came in their apartment.
But not even that. So imagine this. You have, I don't know, 5 people running for office. Maybe your Secretary of State, maybe your governor, maybe your state rep, your state senator. Like so many people are running for office at the same time. And what if we all say, this is a real help if we get the application to voters? So now people are getting 3 or 4 applications in the mail. And I can tell you my phone starts ringing off the hook. Registrars' phones start ringing off the hook if someone receives more than one application because they think there's a direct correlation to ballots. There is not, but they think it.
So it's confusing. A lot of people are asking.
Exactly.
And Harry's asking about ballot harvesting. This is what I asked you. Then there's the issue but are you also talking about who can bring them back?
No, I'm talking about who can issue them.
And then how about bringing them back? Isn't that the problem in Bridgeport when they caught them on camera bringing buckets, harvesting hundreds of ballots?
So that depends on a lot of things. So like everything in elections is so complicated. So I would say there's 2 types of issues. So in Bridgeport, we've had election monitors for the last couple of years. So when that story broke in 2023 and they had to do the redo election, we had
must have been interesting for you.
I know, that was my first year.
Welcome to the
I was
job.
like, oh, great. So, yeah, but I like a challenge. So so we had our election monitors actually call people who had applied for absentee ballots for the redo just to check in with them, right? And I was amazed. There were several instances where the voter was like, oh yeah, this was me. I did it. I believe in voting. I filled it all out. I sealed it up. And then that nice lady in the building who collects them dropped them off for me. So that happens to be illegal in Connecticut. But people need to understand that is not illegal in most other states. Because here in Connecticut, only certain people, in accordance with the law, can return your absentee ballot.
And that's because we're worried that they're going to cheat and fill it in,
I just think a lot of our laws are old. So, if your aunt happens to stop by and says, "Oh, hey, I'm going to drop,"
but she
can't do it.
But you have the political campaign people who bring 600 ballots in a bucket.
No, but what I'm saying is the voter intent was not jeopardized in any way. But they ended up breaking the law by not realizing who could and could not return the ballot. Then there are different types of stories and allegations that we've seen in these arrest and court cases where, people might have been threatened or promised something if they voted a certain way.
There's pressure. You're alone in your apartment.
Yeah.
You might be an elderly person and someone who's big. I've seen some of the people in Bridgeport.
Yeah.
They threaten me physically. I mean, these are threatening people.
Yeah. I mean, this is a segue to voter education, which I know people are like, before we get there.
No, I think it will. But before we get there, do you want to change the rule on who can pick it up, or do you want to say that you have to? Do you want to say if there's universal absentee ballot voting, do you want people to have to send it in themselves?
I'm still waiting for some data on that. One of the things I would like to really look at is the time period for a cure process.
What's cure mean?
So that means if like something seems wrong about the ballot when it's returned, like the signature doesn't seem the same, or the name, like maybe you're registered as Stephanie, but you signed the envelope Nikki, or or something seems improper, you can contact the voter in most states and give them an opportunity to come back and recast their ballot, and fix whatever's wrong. Some states, it's as long as a 3-week period or 3 days, like we had in COVID here in Connecticut. So I definitely want to look at that and a host of other things. People don't realize how complicated the system is.
Would it be simple to just say you got to send it back yourself, or no?
No, I wouldn't be more restrictive than current law, which allows members of your household, like if you're a college student, your parent can return it. Anyone, like an immediate family member, like your spouse, your child, etc.
Can you mail it?
Yeah. So that can all happen. But I definitely, I don't know. I want to look at how other states are handling.
And you said 8 states have just voting by AB by mail.
Yeah.
Does everyone get mailed the ballot?
Yeah. Application. Yeah.
Why can't you just get the ballot?
I mean, every state, as far as I'm aware, has a 2-step process because the election workers have to verify that the right person is still at the right address getting the right ballot.
Gotcha. We're talking to Steffi Thomas, Secretary of the State on WNHH FM. Anything else about Bridgeport? So we had a couple scandals, another wave of arrests, second round or third, I've lost track, about them in the municipal elections, stuffing ballot box, breaking rules. How are you feeling about it now? What do you got in place?
I feel more hopeful. Obviously I've only been secretary for 3 years, and what I want, there's a few things I want to say about Bridgeport because I think it's commonly misunderstood. When the 2023 story broke, I started doing some research, and a lot of these problems have gone back 30 years. So not related to drop boxes, for example. And a lot of these cases have involved the same people. And it never led to an arrest or any conviction. I think what we're looking at now is very different. So although it has been a problem, I don't want people to think there are thousands of people out there like doing wrong. A lot of the stories and court cases that I've heard have been that literally the exact same people. So I am hopeful.
What are they doing that's wrong?
It's run the gamut from obviously this is all handled by the State Elections Enforcement Commission. We're not subject to receive any special information that's not available to the public. So all the things we talked about, a lot of the allegations have to do with kind of strong arming or trading favors for votes, or returning ballots that they shouldn't be returning because they're not authorized to do so. And, I'm sure there's other allegations in there. But so what we've done, our election monitors have been on the ground. We changed it. So not only do we have lawyers there, but we have lawyers who also happen to be former registrars or town clerks or current registrars and town clerks to make sure not only that the law is being followed, but that processes are like all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed from a staff perspective. We also have worked with the legislature to pass half a dozen laws at this point that close some of the loopholes that are good, not just for Bridgeport, but for every town in Connecticut.
What would be an example of a loophole?
Like Dropbox cameras. Bridgeport had cameras already on their Dropboxes, but now every town has to have them. And thank God for those cameras,
those are good
right?
Photos, yeah.
Because without that, like literally the exact same allegations were made in 2019, but because it was through a mailbox, there was no proof. the fact that that footage now has to be kept is another law, because if someone alleges something, those tapes were taped over every couple of days, like security footage is. So now it has to be kept. There's a ton of like changes about um, the amount of time before an election someone can circulate ballots. It has to be for a certain election, a certain year. A lot of forms have changed. But one thing that I really am excited about, it became very clear to me that we can't be everywhere. We need people looking out for neighbors and family on the ground. We need whistleblowers so that every single time there's an allegation, it gets filed. So we have now been able to use some of the election monitor funding for a bilingual public education campaign. So this election season, mail, television, radio, buses, digital. We've been like educating people, like it's their responsibility to understand how to vote correctly and legally. And if they see something, say something and call this number.
All right, we're talking to Secretary of the State Stephanie Thomas and WNHH FM's Dateline New Haven. So we talked about one set of local threats here or challenges. Next year is going to be twice the size because it's a national election, even though it's not a presidential election. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of concern among people who don't support the 2020 election denial campaign and insurrection at the Capitol, that people who were part of trying to overthrow the government, to overthrow an election, are now going to be making the rules for you and me.
Yeah.
So let me give you a few things people are concerned about, see if they've been on your radar. So there's a woman named Heather Honey. She led some of the efforts to overthrow the 2020 election nationally. She's now the Assistant Secretary for Election Integrity at the Department of Homeland Security. She has floated an idea of declaring a national emergency based on her idea that the 2020 election was stolen, using that as the basis to seize federal control over state elections so that Stephanie Thomas is not going to be overseeing the next election. A woman who tried to overthrow the U.S. government will be. How are you facing that? What have you thought about that, or how are you planning for it?
Yes, I've thought about it. So it's important to understand there is a National Association of Secretaries of State for all of us. We convene a couple of times a year. We have committees. I'm on the executive board. I serve on the Elections Committee, the Cybersecurity Committee, and the Business Services Committee. And as committee members, we meet every other week. And in those meetings, we get to hear directly from Ms. Honey was on a call a couple of weeks ago. We speak directly with USCIS, Immigration Services, Department of Justice, White House staffers, fill in the blank. And this is a bipartisan group of secretaries, and I don't want to give the impression that these are partisan issues. Most of us who got into this business believe in the right to vote. And there are many of my Republican colleagues who push back very hard against the election denial movement because they know more than most people exactly what goes into running an election.
We saw in Georgia that Republicans bravely stood up.
Exactly.
And this is separate about whether people cheat in elections. This is whether there's a national emergency based on this theory that the 2020 election was stolen by dead people in Venezuela and these machine companies that were faking it for Democrats. So, but let's say we've read, what we've read about. So you're telling me that they're serious secretaries of state. We've heard and read articles where Republican officials say, if I do something that Trump doesn't want me to do, they threaten my life and my family. This isn't about re-election.
Oh, no, it's
so if Heather Honey
true.
and Trump say this is a national emergency, the National Guard's coming in, and they're going to run the election places and decide which votes count. And Republican officials, as they have on every other issue, feel that they will die and their family will die if they say no to Donald Trump when he sets the mob on them. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Stephanie, what are you going to do? I mean, do you think that's going to happen?
I think
Why else would Heather
There
Honey be
are
there?
many people in positions of power who were in the election denial movement. I find that troubling. I think you'd be hard pressed to find any most secretaries who are not concerned about what that means for our overall system. We know for a fact cybersecurity has changed. In case you're not aware, CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, is the division of Homeland Security that has been providing assistance to secretaries over the last many years, providing threat assessments
And the
for.
and the and the irony is the Trump administration just shut down the unit
Yeah.
that monitored
Yeah.
whether other countries are trying to come
Yeah,
in and
so
screw with our
foreign
election.
interference
So now,
intelligence,
if
we
Russia does something, we
already
don't
are
know.
not getting a lot of the free, like Connecticut has very good cybersecurity at the state level, and we fall under that. But in many states, that is not the case. Each jurisdiction has to do their own cybersecurity. So the federal government has shuttered those cybersecurity services that used to be provided free. And now there's a nonprofit entity who has decided to take them up, but these jurisdictions now have to pay for it. And there are a host of other concerning
What
things
about the National
happening.
Guard? What if Trump and Heather Honey call in the National Guard to take over the election from you? What are we going to do?
I don't know yet, Paul.
Do you think it might happen?
Anything can happen, I would say, quite honestly. But this is where everything comes down to we the people. I believe so strongly that most citizens are sleepwalking through the democratic process and not understanding how elections work. What is that threat? We live in a wonderful time of open government where you can find out all these things quite easily. And I think we, the people, will have to decide what we want to be true about our election systems. As Secretary of the State, I would like to ensure that we always have free and fair elections and that we have security procedures set up to protect us from malfeasance and misinformation. And I hope other Americans feel the same.
Well, you went to Congress to talk about your concerns about some of this in April. Yeah. You testified before Congress that you feel there are new federal mandates like the SAVE Act and a recent executive order that will destabilize voter security and undo years of bipartisan progress. What were you talking about specifically?
I was talking specifically about Connecticut, and I think if I back up a little bit, it will explain a lot of this. A lot of people seem to think that election security and election accessibility are at odds, but you can have both accessible elections and secure elections. But both things are subject to the same rules. They have to follow the U.S. Constitution, and in our case, the Connecticut Constitution, and you have to have the time and resources to roll it out appropriately. And a lot of the things coming out via the federal government right now are being rolled out very quickly. And one of the things I'm not comfortable with is Connecticut voters being guinea pigs right now. Like, build it first. Right now, they're asking people to do things while systems are imperfect. And
like what?
A good example, like USCIS, not the SAVE Act. There's the SAVE program. So a few states are doing beta testing right now where they're sending immigration services their entire voter file to run it against. A lot of people don't realize there is no one place that has a list of American citizens. So instead, what they're doing is running it through about 8 different databases that have some information about non-American citizens. So, like, if you got your naturalization ceremony, or you're an asylum seeker, they run that through and then they send it back to the states. So now states are having to figure out if someone came back inconclusive, what that means. So they're now having to investigate sometimes hundreds of thousands of people trying to figure out if they're a citizen. Um, uh, so there's a lot happening with the SAVE program, the SAVE Act, the cybersecurity angle, and many other things. All of it is being discussed. Everyone's watching it. The bottom line for me, I do not want to disenfranchise Americans because of a conspiracy theory.
The idea being that there's zillions of undocumented immigrants going to vote, so therefore you have to set this whole process that is unwieldy and impossible, with checking hundreds of thousands of names with no money.
Yeah,
and before someone gets to vote who has a Spanish surname.
Yeah, and the math hasn't borne this out, right? And people don't realize this has been discussed for several decades. States have been trying to solve this for a long time, and what we have found, for many states have done exhaustive searches of their voter rolls, etc. So, like, there's actual data. And what has been discovered is that when more severe restrictions are in place, there are more American citizens disenfranchised than non-citizen voters found. Most states have found, like, you
turns
can
out that
count
more
on
people
one
are turned away who
hand.
shouldn't have been turned away.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So now, Stephanie Thomas, Secretary of the State, you have a new civics education program online. If you go to your website now, there's something called the Power of Civics.
Yes.
You're trying to get people to find out more about their government and their community and to get more involved in it. So how is this working?
Yeah, and it sounds really boring sometimes to people, but I wonder, it's nothing but. When I was the state representative, I was always surprised how few people knew what my role is, how I could help them. I was also surprised, like, major issues would come up that I had to take a vote on, and I would hear from like 2 voters, and I'm like, wow, I guess no one cares about this. Or, and then most of all, people always assume the worst of politicians, but I was elected. I ran on a platform of voting rights and some other things. And when I got to Hartford, guess what? There were 150 other people also elected, but on totally different issues. So we have to, like, duke it out, right, for limited funding and resources. And if I go forth and say everyone cares about voting rights, but no one, like, testifies in a public hearing or sends letters or emails, no one believes it. So other causes get the money. So all of that is to say, when I was going around in 23 talking about those stories and how people, if they want to see something happen in their town, in their state, in their country, they have to get involved beyond election day, because no policy is written on election day. So you have to stay involved to make sure the people you elected in a representative democracy know how to represent you correctly. And the one thing I heard, everyone said, "Oh my gosh, I never learned this. What else could I do other than vote?" So that is when the idea came forth, and we started it back in 23. And our goal is to teach people how local, state, federal government is organized, how it works, when you can have a say, how to do that, because when something happens in your family, like maybe your child is having an issue in the schools, or you see that headline about something about to happen in your town, that is not the time to try to figure out, who do I call? How does it work? Like, you need to already have the information. So I'm like, civics is lifelong learning, so that if you want to say something, how to make it known to those who are making the decision.
So you have some online now. You can take a course, which I haven't taken yet. I had trouble registering, but your office has helped me get that in.
Good.
But you also have a lot of other stuff on there. It's not a course. It's like why civics matter. Who are your reps? What do they do?
Exactly.
How do we get people there?
Do you mean logged in?
Yeah, no. How do we get people to pay attention to what you're trying to get them to pay attention? How do you get them to access this?
I don't know.
I mean, you've been going around.
I'm
You
trying.
came to Community Foundation New Haven. You talked about it.
Yeah, I've been talking about it everywhere for the last 3 years. We have a lot of partnerships with community groups.
Okay, that's important.
Yeah. I mean, we have formed partnerships, I would say, with over 700 community groups.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And is that to help them to get people to log on and learn about who their government reps are, how they could find out about boards and commissions in their town?
It started because a lot of people don't realize our office has no funding for voter education. So whether that is
why is that?
Because it's not funded.
So you're reaching out to the community groups who are in touch with people to do it. You know, I talked your predecessor Denise Merrill. We had talked. It never happened about doing web literacy education as part of civics. So how do you find out, like go to senior centers, go to schools, go to community centers and say, how do you find out what is real information? Like if you're concerned about what's getting built in your neighborhood or about the laws involving the police, how do you go online and figure out if something's a fake news or real news or what government databases exist? How do you reach out to people to get,
Well, it is starting to happen now. There is a civic education, civic engagement, and media literacy task force in the legislature. They met all last year and put out some recommendations, and they'll continue that work. But these days, it's becoming increasingly difficult. You have to know what the trusted sources are. For election information in particular, it's our website. But everyone has to be careful between AI and interference coming from other countries.
Well, this Sora, this new program at ChatGPT that anyone could make it a realistic-looking fake video in minutes. I was talking about Justin Ellicker. It hadn't been on his radar, the mayor. I said, every time you run for office now, you have a real possibility your opponent is going to put a video of you saying something on a video that you never said or doing something horrible that you never did, kill somebody, stole something. How are we going to deal with that? I mean, that's not your job
I know,
fix, but it is going to be in your realm.
Have been looking at this for years, of course.
What are we going to do about deep fake?
The only thing you can do is educate people to not, fall prey to the clickbait, right?
Well, what Putin did in Russia was they knew people weren't going to believe the fake stuff he puts out, but he's okay with that. That's what he's trying to do in America, too. And that if you don't believe in anything, then there is no truth. So authoritarian leaders can just do stuff without you knowing.
But I think people can have agency, and they have to take responsibility. I mean, a good example last week. I don't know if you saw our media blitz. Some entity put out an email to Connecticut businesses that looked like it was
a scam for business registry. You're spoofing it.
Yeah. So they sent out this spoof, and luckily people called us is this real?
And was this to get them to send them your information so they can hack your?
We're not sure, but we think it was hoping, or it was going to be a malware situation
where they get you to open something.
Yes, because it was we have an important document for you to sign.
I got so many Denise Merrill emails when she was Secretary of State that had malware. I almost opened them.
Oh my gosh!
I got so much from Secretary of State Denise Merrill. There was this wave of stuff for a few months.
I mean, hackers are always doing
rough.
things.
Well, I like what you're saying about agency. We do have agency.
Yeah.
We could find out the truth if we want. And we don't have to be prey.
And I always say this: Connecticut is a small state that acts like it's Texas. Here in Connecticut, I run into my congressperson on the street.
Yeah.
Connecticut elected officials are everywhere. So you don't have to listen to something that came across in your social media. You can actually go to their office hours. They all have open coffee hours, or you could call their office and say, does this person believe this? And you'll get an answer. I mean, we should take advantage of that, especially in this era.
Yeah. And then they sign up for civic education at the Secretary of the State website. So before I let you go, this is a even number year. You run the elections. It's really interesting talking to you about how this is a trial year to see how early voting works and how it's going to mesh with the absentee voting. You are the only constitutional officer of all the people who have statewide office who have filed already to run again for re-election next year. Why did you make that decision? What's it going to look like?
I know my own mind, right? Like, even when I filed in 2022, a lot of people were like, file an exploratory committee. And I'm like, well, why? Because I know I want the job. Same thing here. I know that there have been so many projects we've gotten done, new tabulators, new voter registration system, early voting, just to name a few, not to mention everything on the business services side, which is a huge part of our work. But a lot of that was given to us by the legislature. So there are still things that I wanted to do that I haven't gotten to. I would definitely love to continue modernizing our election system. A lot of our equipment and processes was done like 20 years ago, so we need to upgrade.
So if it was work that you like doing, that could be done.
Yeah.
Is it fun?
I love it.
Because my favorite political article of how politics works of the last decades was one that Dan Harr wrote about you at the convention.
Oh, yeah.
So it was so interesting is that all these people running for Secretary of State, you were the person with the least experience in the mix. And you emerged.
Well, the most experience for the job, meaning I have a master's in management, but I had
elected
not
office
been
and
elected.
Constituencies. And I wondered, how did Steffi Thomas emerge as the winner at their political convention, which is like run by elected officials? And he talked to the delegates, and it was this like Frank Capra movie where you actually had democracy work the way it did. You had sat down in their houses and talked to them. And they just decided, delegates to a convention, that you were the one that he thought would do the job.
And by the way, they told me they weren't voting for me. I went into that convention with a guaranteed 11% of the vote. But when I spoke, I talked about a lot of these issues that, I'm an authentic, real person. I tell the truth. I have values and ethics, and I bring that into everything I do. And I guess they
And you had
believed
Angels Envy Bourbon with one family university. Remember?
I did.
Had any sense, or was that a one-off?
No, we're friends now.
What about the Angels Envy?
Now I've moved on to other brands of bourbon.
Which your favorite?
Actually, I've been doing
because you weren't a bourbon person
I've been
last
doing
time.
Irish whiskey now because a friend got married in Ireland, and I went, and yeah.
What kind?
What's it? Tullamore?
Oh yeah.
Delish.
I'm a Knob Creek person of bourbon.
Oh, okay.
I think nothing comes close.
Okay.
But I guess my question is, what's going to be different now? Last time you were the person who ran the Frank Capra movie out of nowhere, a challenger, had the least years in elected office. What's it going to be like running as an incumbent?
I don't know. I've not done it before, but I think my record speaks for itself. We have done so much work, both in modernizing elections, building a lot of bridges with registrars and town clerks across the state, working in conjunction with them to make our system better. Our civics portfolio, bringing new young people into the mix. We have a great team, I have to say. We've gotten a lot done with very little resources, and there's a lot more we can keep doing, especially as more people are starting to feel disenfranchised, are like backing away from government. I think our democracy, this representative democracy, needs all of us in order for it to work. And I want to help.
Well, and thanks so much for making time to come back to the studio.
Absolutely.
We love when you visit, Stephanie Thomas. Thanks to Secretary of State Stephanie Thomas for coming on the show. Thanks to Harry Droz for working the controls and getting us in all sectors of the web sphere. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day, all night, and all weekend long at WNHH New Haven's home for community radio.